Review Show!
That's right.
I kind of felt like doing that like the Muppets opening.
Indie Review Show!
Everybody's just screaming.
Do the dance. Anyhow.
My hands are being controlled by the wires attached to my wrists.
The Muppet dance is the best. It's impossible to dislike.
I'm just gonna. Oh, Josh, why am I live on the internet right now? Yeah, let's do this thing. I am Cory Kerr.
And I'm Joshua Kemble.
And this is the Indie Review Show.
This is the series where we review the best of indie comics and other media like movies, TV, cartoons, books, and did we mention comics? The idea is that we're pulling back the curtains on our inspirations.
Josh and I are professional illustrators, cartoonists, animators, graphic designers. Both been art directors, and we've both taught at the college level. And we are getting into the stuff that inspires us in our own personal work. And so, yeah. So, Josh, let's do some plugs before we jump into the book.
All right. Let me see here. And let me just switch over to here. So this is my graphic novel about faith and mental illness. It's a comic that I've hand lettered and hand inked. And it's basically like on sale on Amazon right now for like $11 or something ridiculous like that. So if you like the type of stuff we review and that kind of thing, I highly recommend going and getting this. You can get it at any online bookseller pretty much, but and also you can request a local indie friendly store, order it. But I would recommend just go to Amazon while you can get it for close to half off and order it through there. So yeah, that's my plugs for the day. What are yours?
Yeah, so for me, I just want you to go to corykerr.com/animations and check out some of the stuff that I've made there. Let me put that on the site. There we go. So you can go watch some of the things that I've done with that. And yeah, so I've got some award-winning animated shorts and some weird looping things. And I'll be doing some more of that type of stuff. If you want to follow along, corykerr.com/online will get you to my Instagram and my YouTube and all that jazz. So, yeah. All right. So let's do this while we switch over here. And so tonight we are going to cover Action Hospital. I'm really excited because I don't know anything about this.
Yeah. So, okay. So this is a book that I was introduced to through actually Jim Lujan, who introduced me to Dave Baker, who's this relatively young cartoonist. Like, I think he's still, maybe I'm wrong. And if Dave watches this, I apologize if I get his age wrong, but I think he's still in like his 20s. And he's created so many graphic novels. He's written everything from, like, for his day job, he's a writer. So he was worked for companies like 20th Century Fox Home Video, Universal, Disney XD. He also writes the comics. He wrote the graphic novels, Suicide Forest, Fuck Off Squad, Teenage Switchblade, and This Is Not a Girl Gang, Professor Cuties, Night Hunters. Most recently, he did a run on Star Trek Voyager, Seven's Reckoning. And then he also has a book coming out through Dark Horse called Everyone is Tulip. And he currently writes and co-draws this comic as well, Action Hospital. So I think he's working on continuous volumes. And this is volume 2, which to me I thought was the most interesting because the first volume he split it, between like 4 or 5 different artists. And this volume, he executed the entire 250-page book on his own, which is kind of unbelievable. So roughly, before I get into like the story and the art and stuff like that, I'll just kind of give a brief description. It chronicles the exploits of the employees of Action Hospital, which is like this B movie, like sci-fi fantasy intergalactic hospital featuring mythic creatures and people with special abilities. And this volume features time-traveling cave dudes, robots who can predict the future, four-armed gondolier-themed assassins, and existential despair. So now we can kind of get into the meat of it. But sound interesting so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so first thing is, like, this is a self-published comic, and look at that. There's like a spot gloss on the cover, and the color is just really cool. Like, it's a nice use of like very subtle like split compliments, which I think is really cool. And
so, do you know if he kickstarted this or anything? Because I mean, to get a UV spot, you got to do a decent print run.
Yeah, and he did kickstart this, and I think he tends to kickstart like I think Night Hunters he put out through Floating World in Portland, which was like a great comic book store. Like if you live in Portland and you want to go to like an indie friendly shop, but they helped him distro it. But even Night Hunters, they also funded through Kickstarter. So yeah, so there's that. Okay. So, but yeah, it's beautifully printed, and whoever, I was a backer for it, but the other people I think who backed it probably didn't regret it once they saw this like beautifully printed book cover. Okay, so let's get into it. Oh, and I actually brought a timer. Haha. So I'm gonna keep on time this time, in theory. All right, so okay, so here's the credits first. I just kept my notes here as physical notes, so there will be a lot of paper wasted. But yeah, so you'll see that it's written and illustrated by Dave Baker, who's actually a friend of Jim Lujan. So that's how I knew him and was introduced to him. But I forgot to mention, he also co-hosts a really good podcast on iTunes that is just like, it's called Deep Cuts, and it's created by like Boy Genius Radio, and they kind of actually, Cory, you'd be like really into it because it's just like super deep dives into obscure topics online, and I think you'd be a fan of it because they cover like really weird, just like conspiracy theories and then debunk them. But they also do stuff like a full episode that's like a rock opera of like the Napster, like controversy, like the whole story of Napster as like a rock opera. So anyhow, all right. So you'll also see he frequently collaborates with Nicole, and I can never pronounce her last name, but I think it's Guaux. And that's one of his frequent collaborators, and then some other contributing artists as well. And then the cover was Dave Baker and Nicole Guaux, which you'll notice like her illustration skills are definitely a lot stronger than Dave's, and I don't mean that as like a diss on Dave. It's just Nicole's done like Batgirl comics and a bunch of like crazy like heavy hitting comics, and he collaborates with her a lot where he'll write and she'll illustrate books for him. And then the layout's by Mike Lopez. So there's all the stuff we need to know. All right. So this is one of the things I like about Dave Baker. It's like you'll notice like the drawing is fairly like naive in style, but it's definitely like, it definitely requires a knowledge of drawing to draw this quickly with that much detail. And it's definitely a unique style, but you're going to notice that like, the perspectives are a lot more playful. Like the anatomy gets way more playful, but also just this immense crazy detail where he'll like noodle every little leaf in this scenario. But here's one of my favorite things about Dave Baker that we're going to get into as we get into this is he does things with paneling that I rarely see people do, like showing a leg to create like a tension and create the idea of running through this forest. So right here, you have that and the heavy breathing, and we'll kind of zoom through it. It's 250 pages, so I'm going to go pretty quick. But then we have this zoomed out picture. It's like this kind of weird Amazonian jungle. Actually, it looks, like we're talking like Mayan pyramids kind of thing.
Yeah.
And okay, our character's running through the jungle. There's this weird 8 that's like drawn it every here and there for things. And I think this is just a really cool paneling trick to build tension, weirdly enough. So, yeah. Okay.
And
so
none of those are repeated, right? They're all drawn in.
Yeah, they're all redrawn. I also forgot to mention Dave also did this project where they redrew Watchmen and just called it Shitty Watchmen. And it was literally just redrawing Watchmen panel for panel, like 5 different cartoonists, just super badly. Anyhow, you can probably find that at a convention if they ever have conventions again. So once again, it's like you're getting, this running sequence as we're running through this forest. Clearly this character is trying to escape something. Once again, like another shot of like the Mayan pyramids. And with this cool kind of abstract stylization of like shapes, like I think this is a good example where it's definitely a unique style that he draws in, Yeah, and
it's interesting his contrast of areas of complexity and areas of simplicity. Because I mean, if it were all like the lower right hand corner, then it would be nonsense. It would just look like one of those adult coloring books.
Yeah.
But we have kind of the road and the areas of the trees on the lower part of the trunk and the leaves.
Yeah.
That will give us some breathing room and some like contrast so that the forms can stand out. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And I do like, he does a lot of like nonsense tech too, which is really cool. It's like a Jack Kirby kind of thing where in old Marvel comics, they just do these like ridiculous tech details on things. And so it kind of, I don't know, it's nice to see that used. All right. So here we're finally getting introduced to characters. So throughout this whole sequence, which by the way, this is another thing I love about Dave Baker. You have this large panel. You have like these panels with characters, but in the meantime, you also have all these little ancillary panels like around, just giving you little details from this crowd scene. So we're being introduced to the cave dudes. So we find out that like this 9 3/4 demon is basically called the God Emperor, I guess. And Lord Spider here is speaking for him about to the cult of cave dudes about a sacrifice. And we find out that like a holy child has been taken, and they need to apprehend the invader who stole this holy child, so that they can commence their sacrifice. And the fun thing about Dave's work too is you can tell he's having a lot of fun drawing all these different characters like in these sequences, and each one has like their own kind of characteristic traits. And then the dialogue is just hilarious. So one thing I really, obviously Dave is a professional writer, so his strength is definitely writing. But I also think like what I take from his work all the time is like paneling stuff, like paneling ideas like that, where you'd have like ancillary frames, like giving you details from the crowd. Very good page layouts and stuff. So, okay. So now, once again, it's kind of more of that. They're talking about the child that's been stolen, and basically there's a very funny bit between this guy Larry and the Lord Spider Priest.
Can you hold that up to the camera a little bit?
Yeah. So Lord Spider Priest is basically talking to Larry and Larry's friend. He asks Larry's friend like what's his name, and his friend basically is like, my name is Sven, and he's like, okay, well you're gonna be the new Larry because we're gonna kill Larry for like making the mistake of replacing it. So we have these funny, like a lot of humor. And one thing I also like about Baker's work that you're going to see as you go through this is like, he'll take like a ridiculous premise and he names his characters like, using like puns, which we're going to start finding as we go through it. But the neat thing about his writing is he'll treat it like authentically and sincerely within like a totally absurd world. And so he'll bring these like over the top characters, but then really hit these like very strange, poignant tones like within his storytelling, even though it's like this absurd idea of like an action hospital. I mean, just the name, is kind of funny. So, okay, so now we're finding out, okay, the character is actually running from these cave dudes and this giant 9 3/4 headed demon. And I think it's funny that his name is 9 3/4 headed demon. So we have the hordes of angry cave dudes, and they're chasing. They're all riled up, and they're running after this character who we're going to be introduced to shortly. And then we have these crazy chaotic sequences where it's just the angry crowd, and we're seeing the face of a bunch of different characters overlaid over it. It's kind of hard to see, so I'll sort of try to get it closer to the camera for you. And then basically they're all running, and we finally see our characters up here. And again, nothing new in the plot yet. So now we're introduced to, he has these little call outs for the characters from the previous story. But so Doyle, Schnar is basically the action hospital nurse, bearer of the demon's paw. And we find out that Lazenbeast here is like a patient who's been infected with the Zage, which for some reason makes him like speak with just this weird head with glowing eyes. And we find out that throughout these sequences that like Doyle is missing playing music with Joan, who's a character we're yet to be introduced to, that he likes playing music and worries that Joan doesn't have her heart fully in music because she's constantly working at Action Hospital. So then I think that's basically where we're at. And then we're basically introduced to a couple other people that we'll get into in a second. So now we're introduced to Joan, and this is Joan Michelle Basquiat. Like, once again, he has like a lot of these kind of very tongue-in-cheek, like punny names for the characters, but she's a nurse at Action Hospital. She's in a band, and we find out she, holding a baby, is the person who's been running from this demon horde. She shows up. We're introduced to this guy, the gondolier, who has like 4 different arms and apparently can time travel. And all of these people from Action Hospital, and we find out that they have taken this strange time machine on a trip through time to go back into the past. So they're in like, a very ancient era. And we also find out that we're also introduced to this character, but not his name yet. So we'll get into that in a second. But we find out that Doyle is really upset that she stole a baby. And we're informed that like they're not supposed to kind of mess with the timeline. I don't know if that makes sense. So anyhow, so now we have the demon horde again, and another one of those like incredible layouts where we're just kind of meeting all these different villains that are going to come, into play later on in the story. And they're all kind of running saying, "For the God Emperor," like I think for this 9 3/4 headed demon. All right, so let's see where we're going. Okay. So now they're deciding to rush to the to get in the time machine, right? And we have this really cool panel layout where we have the 9 3/4 demon like running towards them, and then they're narrowly escaping, and there we go. So Oh, and then by the way, this is Frank Lloyd Wrong, this character. He's like a very Futurama looking robot character with bendy arms. And he's a robot who's never wrong when we're introduced. It actually says that is a robot is never wrong. Has robo bendy legs, has robo bendy arms. It's very silly. So now we have, we find out that there's like so they get back to Action Hospital, like they get in their time machine, they return to the present, and Joan is really quickly pulled away, leaving Doyle with the baby and pulled away to the hospital. And now we have like Joan getting pulled to deal with the code 637, which is like, what is a code 637? And we're introduced to a character, and this is the premise of all the Action Hospital things, is like you have these absurd, figures from like this different world that go to this Action Hospital. This one is Sharkerham Lincoln, who is running, he's in a running war with Numerica, which is where their hospital is located. And then we have Sharker Todd Lincoln, who is his wife, and she's responsible for the treaty with the Lumerians and loves Numerian soap operas, like just little ancillary details like that. But she's clearly been shot, and they're trying to navigate what to do. Sharkerham Lincoln is furious. We're introduced to Joan's father, who is Templeton Einstein Basquiat. And he's a head surgeon at Action Hospital, and this costume is actually what the head surgeons there wear. And you can definitely see some influence from Japanese television shows that deal with where it's like power groups of people, not necessarily Power Rangers, but like predating that, with like some of the helmets and costumes in here. But anyhow, so we have Sharkerham Lincoln and Sharker Todd Lincoln. We find out in this panel was basically like his wife is pregnant and that they have to operate immediately. And they're basically kicking him out, this giant shark dude, out of the hospital room so they can operate. So now we're at the waiting room. He doesn't seem to appear. Now we follow Joan, who has like just dealt with that and is going to check on the baby who's in the maternity ward. And we find out that she's doubting whether, hold on a second. She's doubting whether like saving the kid was a good call because they weren't supposed to kind of interfere, but she came across this adorable 3-eyed baby, and, felt compelled to kind of intervene. And while she's thinking about that, Sharkerham shows up and is looking and talking about children being such very strange creatures. So now we have this like kind of tender conversation where Sharkerham Lincoln apologizes, just because he's under stress clearly because his wife has been shot and his son is on the way. And so she feels pity for Sharkerham and decides to take him on a tour throughout the hospital. And now we have these crazy spreads of like group crowd scenes within kind of these little communities that are around Action Hospital.
This illustrator just is a glutton for punishment.
Yeah, that's the thing. And he's unstoppable. Like this thing, I think, from what I recall, took him about 1.5 to 2 years. So I don't know like how he's having that output.
Wow.
But with like and it's fun to own because you can look throughout and like each crowd has like detail, each character in the crowd. There's little like, little hints and clues kind of thrown throughout it. And like I said, a lot of junk science. Like if you look at all this kind of weird, just mechanism doodles that are kind of thrown throughout for like robots and stuff. So anyhow, so they're walking through, and we find out that Sharkerham is like the leader of an oppressed group of people. Sorry. Like basically the shark, I'm blanking out on what he called the shark city, but like basically the shark city, Sharkmerica, has been kind of repressed by the people that Joan lives with. And so they've been in this war, and Sharkerham Lincoln has kind of ascended to like leadership, and is sort of talking to her about how he doesn't really enjoy leadership. He just kind of does it as a sacrifice for his people. And again, we have this crazy crowd sequence where, there's just details all over the page, of this like crazy crowd sequence. And you can definitely tell he loves drawing,
Yeah. And the cool thing, just real quick on character design.
Yeah.
The main character's design isn't like super insane, but the shape of the hair is so recognizable in a shot like this that it's really easy to like find her and pick out like where we are and where we're going.
Yeah, and he does that clearly with all of his characters. So his character designs are really on point too. And I actually really like the way he inks too. It's very loose, but it's like crazy detailed.
Yeah.
And once again, his paneling and pacing choices are just brilliant. Like even here, we're seeing this variety of people in a crowd, and it can be overwhelming. But then up here, you have like little close-ups and details of people within the crowd. And I think that's just cool. Like, why not have that,
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily advance the story, but it enriches it, And I love that overlapping panels thing. But we'll get into that a little bit later, because I've actually used that from reading this. I got a lot of panel ideas that I've been inspired by. So then we have these great full sequences. She's basically, let's see. So they're basically eating food, talking about what got him into politics. And once again, we kind of find out that once again he's kind of been pushed into politics, and that his wife, like we'll find out a little more about his wife, but his wife who's dying is like the one trying to kind of keep him on like the right path and do the honorable thing. But that at his heart, like, and Sharkmerica, we find out, is very shark-like in the fact that it's like very strength-based for who can be the leader. And so he doesn't have bodyguards, even though he had a hit against him, because that's how they roll. And here we also find out that he's kind of tense, and he'd be happy if he got attacked. He'd welcome the challenge. So now we have her take him to an aquarium that she basically says, like, whenever she's in turmoil, she gets perspective looking at this aquarium. And again, it's just this crazy sequence where, like you were saying, like, if you look at all the junk science on these like arms of this vehicle, it's like you can just tell, like, you're right, he does kind of design pages that are almost like brutal punishment.
I mean, there's so many splash pages in a row that are just giant crowd scenes.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and once again, it's like he's incredibly quick too at creating these. So now we have this panel sequence, and we're hearing more, and here's where we're finding out that his wife is basically behind why he's a good leader. Here we're seeing just scenes from like the war, And
I love that they basically look exactly the same except for the bow tie and like the Puritan female collar.
Yeah, and I also think just some of the character designs are great. Like this shark person, it's just he comes up with really fun premises for this story,
So Gary in the chats is saying either has no day job or no sleep. and Frank is asking, what is this sleep?
Yeah, so that's the thing is like Dave, for anybody who knows him, like I've hung out with him a few times, and it's like I just get the sense that he's just a workaholic, because it's like he does write professionally for different companies and stuff, and that's kind of his day job. It's not an in-house thing, but it's like being a freelance writer is crazy time consuming. And then to do this on top of, like, the weird thing is when this came out, he also put out like, a book with Nicole, and then once again, he's probably working on like the fourth one of these on top of like writing a Star Trek series and Night Hunters and all of this other stuff. So he's one of those guys who just like is mind-blowingly inspiring for like what he can accomplish,
Yeah.
So now we're starting to get into a little bit more of the plot, which is like we find out that this guy, the gondolier, has lost his inhibitor collar, and since he's a time traveler, without that, he starts phasing in and out of time, and he's starting to prophesy like coming damnation, and so now we're going to the delivery room where we have the shark baby, like at the cost of his mother's life, is born, and I guess there's some protocol that they're skipping, that her surgeon father decides it doesn't matter, it's a baby's life, let's skip the protocols. And the baby jumps out and attacks Joan, and Joan instantly kind of reacts. Actually, sorry, it attacks her father, and Joan instantly reacts and has killed Sharkerham Lincoln's child. And so now we have this whole conundrum. So now her father is saying, hey, we got to let the president know. And she's kind of saying like, no, we should do this like tactfully. Like, you got to realize the guy is not going to respond well to this. So now we have the great sequence where Sharkerham's given the news that his wife is dead, and he loses it. And I love this. This is the kind of thing that I think is really unique to Dave Baker, like this sort of page. And this is him gradually just losing his mind over it. So we have his teeth.
Those are panels?
Yes. So we have like his teeth, his eye movements. We have like details of his son's teeth. Like we have all of these little crazy details just to like show you the tension that is building here, right? And I just think that's
never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I think that's kind of inspiring and cool and definitely useful. Like I said, I don't see a lot of cartoonists do that.
Yeah.
And now it's breaking, and we're having all these different panel sequences here that are like close-ups of different elements of the shark as he's breaking through the window. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And so you have like 10 hand movements and a bunch of teeth movements, all these little details like scattered throughout, which is kind of brilliant, So anyhow, shark rampage, and the shark is let loose, pretty much, attacks her father, throws him through the wall. Now we find out now we're back where the gondolier is. And we find out that this gondolier has made like 20 of himself because he's living outside of time at this point. And he is building a time machine for some odd reason. I don't know if you could predict what. And meanwhile, because time is kind of getting suspended and warped, like their reality has been suspended and warped. So it creates these like kind of awesome like model kits of the characters, which I think is hilarious. One of the characters says, guys, I really hate this. And it's like, I feel like it's slowing down. I can't feel my face. So now we find out that he's become the embodiment of time. And so the cave dudes now, time machine's built, cave dudes come. And they're coming out angry for the God Emperor. All right. Almost at the halfway point. So I'm going to just run through this. So what we're going to do is basically pan back and forth between, on one hand, you have the cave dudes that have just traveled through time in a different hospital wing. On the other, you have Sharkerham Lincoln, who's angry and wants to murder everybody because he just lost his wife and child. And what's weird is, even though this is an incredibly silly story, we also have like empathy for Sharkerham because he gave that quiet moment with Joan, right?
Yeah.
And we're, intrigue. I don't know. There's intrigue, and you're kind of interested in the well-being of the characters because he's given you enough detail about each character where it's like you don't want people getting killed, right?
Yeah.
So now Sharkerham's running through. Sound of primal anguish is what he's doing. He's aiming to destroy. We have the cave dudes. He has been communicating with the God Emperor, and the God Emperor is basically telling him, like, well, now you're going to be a great sacrifice to us. Thanks for doing it. 9.5-headed demon is now controlling the gondolier. And Joan and Frank Lloyd Wrong, they're running away, right? So, okay. Let's see here. Okay, so they're being chased by the cave dudes. You are finding out different sequences. Like this person has like a kind of like visual display on their arm where they can see the portal. But their comms are out, so they can't communicate with other people in Action Hospital. They decide to split up. And basically everybody's chasing Joan at this point. So we have cave dudes running. Once again, like the paneling and page layout, I just think is really intriguing, the way he kind of paces things out. Okay, so here's another trick you rarely see in comics that I think is really neat. So now we go to a full page action sequence that will go for a really long time. Are you still in it?
Yeah.
All right. So Joan is running. She's running down the hallway. She looks behind her, right? And we have this whole action sequence that literally plays itself out in each page, where she just, puts on this blaster thing, shoots a ray, then comes in here, and now we have this whole kind of almost animated sequence, and I think this is smart. Like, have you seen this done in comics?
No, I mean I've seen people like add like a little like flip book in the corner or something, but I've never seen it really as like part of the story.
So there's our cave dudes. She's hidden from them successfully, except one of them was looking, and they're about to pass through, and all clear. And let's see here. Okay, she's about to head out, and oh no, for the God Emperor, she gets attacked. So now we have this cool sequence where we're getting a little bit of his own personal story. Like as this fight's going, like he has a love at home, and like, this is when he's like recruited by the, it's just kind of awesome.
Yeah.
So there's a brutal fight sequence. Again, just kind of go through it. She gets an idea. The fight pauses like a cartoon where she goes, wait, hold on. Then pow. And that was like her fake out. Another really cool paneling trick. So now we've followed Joan, right? And we're back to Sharkerham Lincoln on his just tirade. And here he's just disposing of all these robot guards, breaking through. This is literally different levels of the hospital. So he's breaking through the floor, works his way over here, just causing all this destruction, jumps down. So again, like, I think for people who do comics, like the paneling stuff that he's doing just the choices and paneling are really crazy and awesome.
Yeah.
They do a full page spread where you're doing different levels of a building, having the character move throughout it. All right. So
man, that was incredible.
Yeah, it's kind of unbelievable. So, okay, so now we have this fight that's going on, and we're having them communicate to Joan. Joan is saying, like, keep Sharkerham away from this 9.5 headed demon, or 9 3/4 headed demon, because it's going to get dangerous, right? And now we have the gondolier, and he is going to be sacrificed to the 9.5 headed or 9 3/4 headed demon. And we also find out through that exchange that it's too late. Sharkerham's going to get there. And now we have, oh, dang. So we have Sharkerham, who's been established as this very powerful shark human, right? And a 9 3/4 headed demon. And he wants to murder anything in his sight, and 9 3/4 headed demon will destroy anything to get to the child, who's the chosen. And now we have, again, another crazy full page fight sequence where it's just going to be this fight. And I want to go through this quickly because anybody who's interested in this definitely should support it and pick it up, because this is an indie book, so it goes directly to the creator. But anyhow, so it's a very detailed fight sequence between Sharkerham and the 9 3/4 headed demon, right?
The way he's controlling movement, like of the eye beams, and you would want to sit with this book for a while and just like figure out how he's leading people's eye, because that's so good.
Yeah, it's mind blowing, and like the control. Like I said, at the top, it's like I'm not trying to knock his drawing abilities because he's an incredible artist. But on top of that, like what's really compelling to me about Dave Baker's work is the sheer amount of just like pure commitment to the medium. And then also just this mastery of panel choice. Like just literally like he does things in comics that I've seen kind of done here or there, but he kind of like brings all the different techniques of paneling kind of to play. And I think it's very effective and compelling, So here we go. We got this full page sequence still. It's a fight sequence. And we start finding out Sharkerham like bites off the arm of this kind of 3/4 demon that's at the top of the 9.5 or 9 3/4 headed demon, and his arm grows back in this very cool illustration. more fight sequence. These I'm just gonna blow through because again, it's just to give you a taste of like what he's doing. I also just love the it's a thing called in art. There's a thing called horror vacui, which is something that can be a style, which is like leaving no empty space. And I think he actually does that really well too, where it's like he over noodles to the point where it's awesome,
right?
Because he does it like so much that it like if it were half that much on this head, it might seem like overkill, but the fact that he just commits to the whole thing, suddenly it just goes from like something you shouldn't do in art to something you should, I don't know. It's really cool.
Yeah. So I want to point out that Gary said, you guys got me again, just ordered a copy.
Yeah.
And if anybody else is interested in ordering a copy, you can go to irsagency.com to get a copy directly from Dave's website.
Yes. And his website's Hey Dave Baker as well. And he's a good podcaster too, and just an overall good guy. So support him. So there's just this crazy amount of detail. Again, just doing these weird, interesting things with paneling where there's a broad set of panels behind, and then again, like a big splash page. But just the immense amount of detail, you know, and also the humor. Like, it's a really funny book too.
Yeah, I mean, the art is incredible, but it seems like a book that you would that I would love reading as well.
Yeah, the story is great, and like I said, the thing I like about Dave's writing, and he writes a lot of like slice of life stories as well. But the thing I love about the way he treats this book is the fact that, like I said, he'll take like an absurd premise and just go all the way with it and make the characters relatable. So he's got this like Shark Man as one of the main characters in this. And by this point in the story, you're kind of rooting for him because you feel kind of bad for him. Yeah. Like losing his wife and kid, because he gives a little humanity to this character, like, who you could just have a comic that's like Shark Man versus Demon, you know, like that sounds fun.
You know, at this point, it strikes me that the interesting thing about the storytelling of this book, is that it plays like a movie.
Yeah.
Not just in the artwork, but in like, you've got, you know, your A plot, B plot, C plot now converging, you know, in a big climactic kind of showdown. But you still have like, you know, like your B and C plot have kind of combined into a single thing, but you've still got A and B because you're going from this fight back and forth between Jane running away and the demon and the shark guy fighting. But I mean, to do all of that concurrently, and at no point in time do I feel like, wait, what is going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's amazing. It's actually quite amazing to have all of those threads converge in a comic where you don't have any sound, you don't have actors, you know, there's no timing and cutting and things that are the types of things in movies that help. You know, there's no like audible theme song that comes on when different characters on to like do a callback to another thing.
Yeah, and the thing that's great too is because it's effective. Like by the time you have like that page, which I can't go back to. There's like too many pages, but it's you know, the page where you first see the 9 3/4 demon and Sharkerham Lincoln like facing each other.
Yeah,
it's like built up to the extent that it definitely feels like, you're right. It's very structured very well to where you have this building tension to where at that point you're just like, yes, like it's going to be a big fight, you know? I kind of wish that were done more in comics. And I think that's, I think this is a really good example of that as well. Like where it's like when you have plot structures with multiple characters where you actually give people a reason to care about their storyline. Then you can have these epic fights and they take on a whole different, level. So
well, and in addition to that, you also see, you know, team-based books where you've got multiple characters, but they're all doing the same thing. You know, a lot of mainstream stuff.
Yeah.
You know, you could smash all the characters into one character because they're all in the same place with basically the same motivation and the same goals. But this is like, this feels much more like an ensemble cast because they're all trying to do different things.
Exactly. All right, so we have Joan. She's got to the natal wing, right? And it's basically ordered them to clear it. And then it's good she cleared it because just in time, because exploding through, we have this epic battle. And again, we have these panels within panels where there's overlap. I think just the structure of these pages is beyond brilliant. Like the way he does that.
Yeah.
And I think I was reading this when I was working on, well, we'll talk about that after. So, but yeah, that page in particular, in fact, I'm going to put a little note in it because I can show you guys like where I specifically drew inspiration for my own work from, like, I think it was about that spread where I saw that done so often in this book where I was like, I got to do that. All right. So now they're running in Fear, we have just Frank Lloyd Wrong is just, you find out that Frank Lloyd Wrong is very much a fighter and is trying to encourage her to not give up, keep fighting. They're trapped in a hallway by the cave dudes. And now it's just like, it's a fight where we've brought almost all of the characters within the hallway. Frank Lloyd Wrong reveals that he has this little time bomb thing. They run out of there, and then we pan back to the fight between Sharkerham Lincoln and the 9 3/4 demon. And okay. You know what? I think that's enough. I don't want to give away the ending because it's just too much of an indie book to tell people how it ends.
So let's take a moment for.
I will also say just like one nice thing at the end before we transition is you have these great spreads by guest artists as well. So it ends with like a lot of cool, pinup art by various artists. So you have a whole bunch of great things, Jim Mahfood included. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. So let's take a moment here to balance the books. And the Indie Review Show is brought to you by Audible, and you can get a free audiobook. And by doing so, you can support the show because they'll give us a little bit of a kickback by going to audibletrial.com/IRS. Let me put that up on the screen there for you. And this week I am recommending the Great Courses, which is not a single book. What it actually is a series of lectures from like the best people in education. So it's like who's the best lecturer on the history of ancient Rome, and they get that guy to do a series. And it is on everything. I mean, it's on history and psychology and science and math and physics and I mean anything that you can imagine. And so there was a year that I went through and I listened to, I think it was like over 70 hours of lectures of like ancient Greece and Sparta and Athens and how that transitioned into Rome and the similarities between different warrior cultures and things, and then got into Egypt and stuff. And it is really, really cool. Everything from self-help stuff like the art of debate to history and all that stuff. And so highly recommended. And if you are interested in anything along those lines or learning that, you can get a free lecture course by going to audibletrial.com/IRS. And if you are interested in any of the books that we have done, you can go to irsagency.com, and every single one of the books that we've done in the past is all under this previous episodes thing. And what we're doing in the future is coming up, and you will notice that you can also click here to order the book. And if you do that, those things are they're monetized so that it doesn't cost you anything more, but it actually helps us because it gives us a little bit of a kickback. And so we always appreciate people doing that because the software that we're using to stream this isn't free. So our ultimate goal is just to see if we can break even on when that is up. So anyway,
love it. That's a good suggestion too. Great courses are like amazing. So
I mean, I love them. It's incredible. Another thing about Audible that is recently really cool is it used to be, for like $10 to $15 a month, you'd get a book, right? And then a little discount on whatever other books you'd buy. But within the last like 6 to 8 months, they've actually opened up a whole free section where just as a member, you can get all kinds of stuff. And they're doing like radio plays now, and they're producing their own content. It's kind of like the evolution of Netflix, where Netflix used to be just like, hey, we're just going to stream a bunch of stuff. but they've evolved into like a producer of content as well, and Audible has moved into that, and I've really enjoyed. I mean, there's more content now. I used to run out, like I'd get through the book and have to wait a couple weeks for my next thing, but there's like more content on there now than you can consume in like a reasonable amount of time without having to pay extra stuff. And so anyway, well worth it. And if anybody's interested, I'd love to talk great courses. So hit me up on Twitter or in the comments of this video or whatever, because I'd love to hear ones that people enjoy, because that's one of my favorite go-tos on Audible is great courses.
Yeah, it is so excellent. And like it's almost like you can attend like a Yale or like Harvard classroom or Oxford classroom for like no cost. Like it's great, and it'll give you the whole course, which is amazing. So I just found this. So this is like a spread that I created on my comic that was directly influenced by Dave's work.
Your camera's really broken up, so
yeah. Maybe I'll have to hold on a sec. Let me see if I can pull it back to the old one, because I did want to show this just to give an example. So here, this spread. So that page in particular on the left is like, that's a direct influence from Dave. So yeah,
that's cool.
I wanted to show that because he's definitely been an inspiration. Also, just his output, like he's fun to follow on social media because you just see this guy just knocking out pages after pages, and often he'll just make a post with like the word grind. And so I think he knows he's got like this kind of incredible output. But so like what I took away is that he's incredibly talented at taking extremely far out like B-movie premise. And I'm not surprised that Gary picked it up, because it's very similar to what Gary does with like Mars Bots, where it's like he'll take like an absurd premise and then treat it with all seriousness. And I think that there's something great about that. And I love that he mixes in terrible punny names and very doodly. I love that like doodly obsessive art style where it's just like, but I also like that he'll make really poignant dialogue to bring deeper meaning to stories, even stories like that absurd. And what I find most moving is just the volume of output, the obsessive work style, and then, as I mentioned, like throughout this whole thing, just paneling choices that I really think push the medium and like I said, have influenced my own work. So thinking outside the box with paneling and story choices, I just think he's a really good example of that. So, and not enough people know about that guy. So, yeah.
That's cool. And it feels like one of the things that I really liked was the pacing of it. When he chose to do, dozens or maybe even over 100 panels on certain pages, like it slowed it down in the moment, so that you can kind of like feel that. But then there are other pages where you're literally flipping as fast as you can through almost like a flip book of double page spreads, but not in a way where like I often feel really bad when people are like, cool, double page spread, and they flip past it, and I'm like, oh man, that was like 3 days of work for somebody, but like the payoff of the speed at which you're able to see that was incredible. And then there were other double page spreads, like the one with Jane in the room. You notice that like there was a lot of negative space and a lot of like blank walls and like intentionally obscured hallway where you could only see part of the hallway through the windows. And so it was almost masked off to the point of like kind of like a Fury Road Mad Max situation where like it's like, just don't look away from the middle of the page, like just keep your eye focused on here because that's where the movement's going to be. And yet other double tracks that he does, he's got the all kinds of detail, and you slow down. And so it's not just like it's not just the equation of like speed up because there's fewer panels, and slow down because there's more panels. I mean, he has the ability to slow people down or speed people up with the same type of paneling. It's like one page, 50 panels, and you might go fast on that, and another page 50 panels, and it might slow you down, and then another 2-page spread goes fast, and then another 2-page spread like slows you down. It's incredible the amount of like nuance and the control of the viewer that you wanted to get across. It's that was very impressive.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, like it's one of those things where the amount of control over the medium is really, it's I will also say it's a really great book to own just for like the fun of looking at those crowd sequences and all the crazy characters he comes up with. And the thing that's his strength as an artist is that he does it really fast. You can tell just looking at it, but like his control over like when he draws a character, like there's strokes that are really fast on inking lines. And yet when he draws these characters, they have so much like information and character and intention behind like the shapes he's choosing. And so like when you're looking at these crowd sequences, it's like he doesn't often pull the trick of like drawing the same guy 50 times, with like a different haircut. It's like it's a crowd full of all these absurd like aliens and robots, and I think that also is like a really good reason to like own it and stuff. So I'm glad you dug the book.
It's
all right. So let's talk about what we can steal.
I'm sold on it. It's awesome.
Cool. Let's talk. So we kind of talked about a few things we can steal. For me, I think the main thing to steal though is like the paneling, the commitment to a story, no matter how far out the premise is, and just work ethic. Like you look at this book, and this is not like I was mentioning fast character drawing, but it's definitely not a fast book. Like this book was a labor, and you can tell because it's just like you were saying, a couple pages in where you're just like, this guy must be like masochist or something. But for me, it's like the thinking outside the box, full page action sequences, panels within panels within panels, which I think is really a cool way to crack open some of what like limits us, I think, as cartoonists. And then you're right, pace is like dead on. Where you have a spread where it's supposed to take time and a spread where it doesn't. So and
I think the biggest standout to me that I want to replicate, steal, infuse into future things, is having A plot, B plot is pretty basic and still kind of difficult to pull off, but I think one of these days I'd like to tackle like two or more threads that are coming together. I think that would be a really fun kind of thing where you introduce 3 to 5 different elements, and then you see how they converge. But it wasn't, to me, just flipping through that, not having read it, but just flipping through it, it wasn't like super obvious. I was like, oh yeah, the demon horde is gonna show up at the time, because like the shark baby dying was unexpected, right? And so that was a twist that I didn't know the shark would rampage, and so having everybody converge in that way was creative, because sometimes the writers will telegraph it, or they'll be like, this thing is going to happen, and like you just know it's going to happen, so there's no real suspense if it's a boring thing. Sometimes there's a suspense if you don't know the effect of that thing, but like if it's just like this thing is going to happen and this will be the effect. But this was like, here's some things that are going on, and here's some other things that are going on, and here's some other things that are going on, and there was no telegraphing of them coming together.
And so that's kind of why that's also part of why I didn't want to show the ending, because he very expertly like ties most of the threads too. So there's no dangling threads except a potential continuation. But excuse me, all the emotional arcs and stuff are taken care of. So yeah. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah.
So, sweet.
Well, that's great.
So like I said before, you guys can definitely go to irsagency.com and see the link. And once again, his website is heydavebaker.com. So
yeah. Yes. And just a quick call to those that have made it this far into the show. If you could go back and take a look at the videos that we've posted, share any of the ones that you're interested in. We'd like to kind of build a base and get a community going around this. We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on things. We'd love to hear your recommendations on stuff. And if you'd like to participate in a review, you have the option of, going to irsagency.com. There's some instructions on how to get us either a video or an audio or a text-based review. And we'd love for you to do that. And if you would like to be involved in behind the scenes, as we kind of build this, we're doing some behind the scenes stuff. Like Josh and I are about to turn the live stream off, but continue to hang out. And that's going to go behind a paywall. So if you're interested in the show and you'd like to support it more than just buying the books, which is always awesome, because that's the main point of this, is to toss some indie love towards some indie creators. But if you want to jump on that, you can go to Patreon, which you can also find at irsagency.com. There's a link to Patreon, and we'd love to have you on there. And we will be posting the behind the scenes and the kind of after party of these things to Patreon. Josh, where can we find your stuff real quick?
All right, you can find my stuff at Amazon, actually, by typing in 2 stories and getting this book. But you can also find links to everything else on joshuakemble.com or quarterlystories.com that'll take you to a little bit of a preview of this book and all that fun stuff. So.
Awesome. And you can find my stuff at corykerr.com, and, go check out the animations, illustrations, comics that I have up there for free. And you can find all the places where I am online, as far as like Instagram, YouTube, whatnot, at corykerr.com/online. So we've already got some people that are saying that they are going to share some things, which is awesome. So appreciate that. And we're going to go behind the paywall. So any of our patrons, you're welcome to hit up the video that we're about to create probably sometime tomorrow. And if we can figure out a way to live stream to Patreon, we'll do that eventually, but we haven't figured it out yet. So anyway, that was great, Josh. I really liked it. Good job.
Yes. All right. Thank you.